So hi everyone, thank you all so much for coming today. This is YouthServe NYC's 8th speaker. And just to remind everyone, YouthServe NYC is a service initiative founded and run by young people who want to become more involved in the work of rebuilding New York City in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis. YouthServe NYC is a way to engage peers in service and in social justice. Today, we are so happy and fortunate to welcome Desmon Lewis, the co-founder of the Bronx Community Relief Effort, as well as co-founder of the New Bronx Community Foundation. Founded in the South Bronx right after COVID-19 hit New York City, the Bronx Community Relief Effort has a goal of raising $10 million to support operations that focus on aiding various needs in the Bronx community. The Bronx Community Relief Effort focused on 8 areas of need, from food insecurity to housing stability, which I'm sure we'll hear about today. So thank you again so much for joining us. We are so excited and fortunate to hear about your work at the Bronx Community Relief Effort and Foundation, and anything else you'd like to share. And I've mentioned this a few times now, but just to remind everyone, later when we do questions, if you have any, you can just type them in the Q&A function and I will read them aloud. So over to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And so I will just start off by giving you a bit of origin story in terms of the Bronx Community Foundation, the Bronx Community Relief Effort. Some of it is a personal story, so I'll start off there. So Desmon Lewis, as Eleanor introduced, I'm one co-founder of the Bronx Community Foundation. My twin brother, Derek, is the other co-founder. And we like to call ourselves products of philanthropy. So my brother and I grew up within the nonprofit sector. We grew up in a family of family members that work for nonprofits. So my grandmother worked at Bronx Lebanon Hospital. She retired after 50 years. My aunt worked at what was called Our Lady of Mercy Hospital, which is was now called Monty North. She worked there for 45 years. My mother worked in the public sector. Again, giving back to the community. She worked for the Department of Sanitation in the Bronx as a secretary. And my father worked in the construction industry as a civil rights activist. And so in the 70s and 80s, he spent a lot of his time picketing and lobbying for minority rights within the construction industry. So my brother and I grew up either running around construction sites, watching our father picket, or running around hospitals or other public sector agency buildings, watching our family really just give back to the community. And so we were born in that environment. We were also born in an area called Morris Heights, which is in the West Bronx, which is an area that's known for a lot of great things. Roberto Clemente State Park, the birthplace of hip hop music, and a number of other great things that Morris Heights has given to the Bronx. Morris Heights is also known for a number of things in the recent past, certainly in the last couple of months, for things that we are we're challenged by, right? One was, if many of you were reading a lot of the New York Times coverage in the summer, they did a very emotional article for us around River Park Towers. They called it the Death Towers because it was one of the largest outbreaks of COVID that happened in a set of buildings that were literally across the street from where my brother and I grew up. So it really hit home. And so, we were afforded by nonprofits to go to a number of great institutions, a great high school in Manhattan, a very prestigious university in Boston. And when we had the time, the resources to do more, my brother and I wanted to do more than just the traditional means of giving back. We sit on nonprofit boards, we volunteer, we mentor Bronx youth. We do all the traditional things people do, but we knew very early on, Eleanor, that wasn't going to move the needle. And so we wanted to find ways to do that, to really make systemic change in our own little way, and really give back to a community that's given us way more than we could give back. And so we came across the legal vehicle or operational structure of a community foundation. And a community foundation plays the objective, unbiased role primarily focused on the prosperity of a neighborhood. And so we said, let's go and do some research on the Bronx Community Foundation. And really that's where we wanted to spend a lot of our time doing volunteer work and giving back. And we were surprised to know that the Bronx, which as many of you on this call may know, is the unhealthiest place in New York State. It's the hungriest part of New York City. It has the largest digital desert in all of New York City. We have nearly 40% of our community without home broadband. We have one of the largest nonprofit communities in the entire city. In fact, the largest sector of employer is the nonprofit sector in the Bronx. We have an environmental challenge where we have highways that are bookend on each side of our community. We have the lowest home ownership in all of New York City, about 18% compared to a national average of 62%. And so with all of those challenges, we thought the Bronx would have a community foundation. Brooklyn has one, which is very famously known. Staten Island has one. Queens has one. Manhattan has obviously a large number of large philanthropic organizations, but the Bronx, the community most in need, did not have its own community foundation. And so we decided that we were going to start the first and only community foundation in the Bronx, focused on solving all of those systemic challenges that I listed. And really what we started to do is we started to do community outreach. So we reached out to a lot of community members, CBO leaders, funders that fund into the Bronx, corporations that have been funding into the Bronx, elected officials. And we galvanized a group of supporters who said, yes, we do believe we need a Bronx Community Foundation. We'll be behind you to go and launch that organization. So we launched the organization and really was going to do a sort of a marketing rollout this year, really just talking about the work we want to do in our organization. And then COVID-19 hit. And when COVID-19 hit, we really couldn't afford to do the traditional launch of a foundation. We put all that aside. And it was really my brother Derek's idea. He said, listen, we need to do something right now. We need to create a relief effort to galvanize a significant amount of support in the community and constituents that were willing to support us and do something right now. So we launched the Bronx Community Relief Effort in basically at the beginning of the crisis in the end of February. And we had a goal of raising $10 million, which you said, Eleanor. We've raised more than $15 million since then. And we're focused on 8 areas of need: food insecurity, housing stability, small business relief, connectivity, technology, and education, small business relief, I think I mentioned that already, apologies, health and PPE, equity and justice, and I believe I listed all 8. I'm probably missing one, but I say this all the time and I always end up missing one. And so those 8 areas of need are effectively sort of our focus areas, right? And those focus areas were not created by us. This was created by our community conversations that we held over the last couple of years. And really we've been focusing on that because the community had decided that that is the area they want to focus on, right? Food insecurity, I think, was one I didn't mention. And so what we've done to date, just to give you some impact numbers across the areas of need, and I'll just pick out 2 or 3 of them. In food, we had a short-term goal of getting meals on the table. So we've distributed over 2.5 million meals since March, with partners like World Central Kitchen, Wrap for Bronx, New York Common Pantry, Prodigal Center, Bronx Works, a number of other institutions. And that's our short-term strategy. Our long-term vision is to eradicate food insecurity. In the education, technology, and connectivity area of need, we distributed over 2,000 Chromebooks and MiFi devices with organizations like Here to Hear, DreamYard, Perscolis, Knowledge House, The Point, a number of other institutions. And that's really was focused on education, because when the DOE shut down schools, we had a large percentage of our youth that went home without access to technology to school at home. They were sent 13 weeks of paperwork, basically, in pens and pencils to go and do that work at home. And so that was our short-term, and that remains our short-term goal. Our longer-term goal is to close the digital divide. There's no reason why in the 21st century we're in, that a community like the Bronx, at the backyard of a lot of the innovation and finance capitals of the world, that we don't have the access to these resources. And so we are pulled together a coalition of organizations to really help fight the digital divide. So I'll pause there because that's a lot of data to download, but really the mission and vision of our organization is to eradicate some of the challenges that that are faced in the community and really bring collaboration to the community. This was one thing that we noticed as a part of our community engagement. More significant collaborative solutions needed to be built out. We can't solve this alone, and no single organization, we believe, can solve it alone. Apologies. And so that's really our goal and our mission and what we're trying to accomplish.
Great, thank you so much. That was great. So I see one question in the chat, but I'll just get started on some and then I'll incorporate
Sure.
those in too. So this first question is more about you and your story. So you founded this with your brother, like you said, and that's very interesting. So what has it been like to work together and to build this with him?
It's a good question. I mean, we're twins, so there's pretty much not many things we haven't done together up until obviously we went to college together. Even though we had, we were blessed enough to have a number of choices where to go, we still ended up going the same place. And we were roommates for all the entire time as well. So we've it's been great. I mean, there's no better person to do it with someone who literally almost reads your mind for every decision you're going to make, and really believes and has the lived experiences, right? We both, if it weren't for my brother, a lot of the challenges we went through growing up, I don't think I would have survived a lot of those things that we went through, right? And so it's been great. My brother and I have been operating 100% volunteer, right? We're 100% volunteer. We don't work for the foundation. No one works for the foundation. It's a volunteer organization at the moment. That's going to change, of course, as we grow and expand. But, we've been in the trenches from the beginning, really just mission-driven, purpose and passionately focused on trying to solve these systemic challenges. And it's just great with someone that sort of knows the challenges, knows how we, believes in the vision, knows how we operate, and really engages the community in the same way.
Great, thank you. Okay, the
Sure.
next one is, so you've talked about the 8 priority areas of need that you've identified. And I think you might have mentioned a little bit about this, but how did you go about choosing those 8 areas of need?
Yeah, I mean, it was entirely driven out of community conversation. So we even though we have lived experiences, we will never proclaim to know the entirety of the Bronx. And the Bronx is a very big place, right? I don't think people know how big the Bronx is. If the Bronx has a population of 1.4 million people, right? If the Bronx were its own city, the Bronx would be the 9th largest city in America, right? If you carved it out of New York, it would be in the top 10 largest cities, right, in the country. And so it's a very big place. It's also the most diverse place in the country. According to the 2010 census, there's no more diverse community in the country than the Bronx, right? I think the statistic says that if you talk to one person, you are 2 times more likely that the next person will be from a different ethnicity, right? And so that diversity brings a lot of knowledge, a lot of solutions, a lot of entrepreneurship. And so we would never proclaim to try to prescribe, even though we lived a lot of the experiences we're trying to fight against, we would never try to prescribe a lot of those solutions. And so we did an extensive multi-year engagement process to engage a lot of constituents, and that's CBOs, individuals, community activists, financial institutions that do work in the Bronx, like trying to gather as much information. And we're still learning, Elena, we're still learning. Those 8 areas of need are bound to evolve. For example, we didn't have PPE in our 8 areas of need. Now we've added PPE to health, right? Because of COVID, we've had to evolve. And so, in fact, it's funny, we had a year-end discussion with one of our partners yesterday, and they said, listen, we think you should have 15 areas of need, right? Like, you need to put in immigration and all these other things. And so this is going to evolve as the community evolves. And ideally, the 8 areas of need will ultimately shrink, right? Because we don't want to be talking about challenges. We want to be talking about opportunities and growth. And so, yeah, so that's kind of where that came from.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Okay, now one from the chat. So someone asked, what kinds of people step forward as supporters in the initial months of your organization, long-term residents, older people or younger activists, and how did you find them?
Awesome question. It was literally a mix. So we started off by going to people we knew, right, which were family members and people sort of like in the first degree of separation. And they obviously jumped straight in because they themselves lived some of the challenges that we're trying to eradicate, and they obviously were very much behind us. Then we went to some of the CBOs, community-based organizations, and we started. And so some of those, sorry, I'm looking at the question now. Some of those people are long-term residents, right? Some of them are older people in our family. And so those are the first group. Then we went to the CBOs and said, listen, you're doing the work on the ground. We need you, right? We need to partner with you on these solutions. Then we went to some of the elected officials. We had Michael Blake, who stepped up, tremendously at the beginning and helped us really start galvanizing other supporters. And then it kind of snowballed from there. We had extreme, at the moment we have probably the largest percentage are young activists working with Bronxites who love our community, who are looking to fight these challenges. And really, it was kind of linked to some of the racial uprising that happened right over the summer, when you had unfortunate things that were happening in our communities. That spawned a lot of the youth activism to happen more than we've seen it previously. And so it's been amazing, really, the diversity of the type of people who've jumped in to help. And really just represents the diversity of our community, right? We have, a very high level of diversity.
Great, okay. Next one. So you mentioned your initial goal of raising the $10 million, and then you talked about how you've been past that goal. Where did you get this money from, and where do you hope to get money from in the future?
Absolutely. So we are really proud to say that we've had over 400 individual donors, right? And when you think of a community like the Bronx, right, where we have the largest LMI of any place in the city, we need low, medium income residents, right? Because as I said, we're a nonprofit community, right? The nonprofit sector employs more people than any other sector. And as you would gather, obviously the nonprofit sector wages are not that high. We have the lowest wage average in the city, right? We have about $35,000, $38,000 on average for a salary, compared to Manhattan, which has about $110,000, right? So we're multiples lower. But we did, we've received a significant number of individual donations, as I said, more than 400. But we also received traditional funding, right? So we received funding from philanthropic organizations who stepped up to the plate. We received funding from high net worth individuals, Judy and Jamie Dimon from the Diamond Foundation being one group, right? On our website, we list a number of these supporters. We've had corporations that have stepped up to provide in-kind donations, right? Whether it's technology, whether it's food, whether it's other resources we needed, right? And so we also had sort of the traditional areas, right? Corporate, philanthropic, high net worth individuals. We don't have the luxury, unfortunately, as other communities where we have like a significant number of our community that has a high average of salary, right? So not only do we need to look locally, right? Because we need to build community support, we have to look outside of our community as well, right? Because it's naturally going to be, the resources needed are going to have to come from various sources, but we're hyper focused on local engagement, local support, and to that effect, again, we're proud to have received a significant number of individual donations.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read another one from the chat. So it says, this is really inspiring. Thank you. You mentioned environmental issues with the 2 highways bracketing the Bronx. I realize and understand it's not one of the most immediate needs. Over the longer run, how are you thinking about environmental issues and environmental justice, especially given the correlation between poor air quality and health impacts from COVID?
Great question. So this is one of the areas actually that our partners have been asking us to add to the additional 8 areas of need. We're covering some of this obviously on the health side, right? The detriment, the social detriments of some of these areas, right? Which is the results of the health ailment. I'm an asthmatic from living in the Bronx. The Bronx has one of the highest percentages of asthma cases in any part of the city. And so, so environmental justice is very, very important to our work because it's core to solving some of the systemic challenges. Some of the things that we've been thinking about working on, obviously, is working with existing organizations that have been focusing on this, like YMPJ, other institutions who've been looking to clean up the Bronx River, right? Another thing people don't know is the Bronx has one of the only freshwater river sources or water sources in the city. I think it's the Bronx River, if I'm correct. Where you have one of the only fresh water sources, right? And so we're also the greenest borough in all of New York City, right? We have more green space in the Bronx than any part of the city, right? People think Central Park is the largest park in the city. It's actually not. It's Pelham Bay Park. Pelham Bay Park in the Bronx is, I think, 1.5 times the size of Central Park. And so environmental justice, environmental issues is very, very important to the work that we're doing. And we're working with a number of higher ed institutions to look through how do we solve those systemic challenges. Some of that's going to be policy, right? A lot of that's going to be policy changes, and how we do things like monitor road traffic, because we have the highways. Clearly, that's a key issue for us. And so yeah, it is definitely something that we're thinking through, and definitely having discussions about.
Great. Okay. Another one from the chat. Have you found that different groups within your community, LGBTQIA plus, specific racial minority groups, single parents, etc., have different needs? And if so, how has your foundation gone about navigating that?
Yeah, so I think, one of the key things that we've started to, so we started on the majority of our work, the first major program is the COVID-19 Bronx community relief effort, right? And so a lot of our work to date has been primarily focused on urgent relief, right? And when you're in an urgent relief scenario, it's sometimes challenging to cater to specific needs, right? Because you need to get resources as quickly as you can to the individuals or institutions that need it in our community. But what we've quickly learned as a part of our work is that in order to solve these systemic challenges, you really need to be hyper local and focus on the cultural, ethnic, or other diversities of our community, right? And so what we're starting to think through is some of that, right? So in the food work that we're doing, right, we truly believe that food insecurity is solved by looking at the cultural needs of our community. We had a hospital come to us, right, and specifically ask us, we'd love to work with you on looking at LGBTQ and other specific diverse sets of community members, and how do you begin to solve those challenges, right? We had another organization come to us and say, pregnancy. There's a large percentage of issues around pregnancy that this one institution had identified, and are looking for us to try to cater to that. And so, you kind of have this funnel scenario, right, where you have to try to cover in an urgent relief situation the largest need as quickly as you can. But quickly, we are starting to look at how do we become hyper local and hyper focused on the needs of individual residents. And so that's definitely on our roadmap to start thinking through. And we'd love to engage anyone, who's interested in particular topics. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to seek advice and talk to you about some of that.
Okay, the next one is, how do you decide which organizations to partner with? You mentioned many of them in the different areas of need, so can you just talk about how you choose which ones?
Sure. So the way we have the 8 areas of need, and for us, I guess we start off by saying we're willing to collaborate with any and every organization, right? So I don't think that we specifically, say we're not, we have a criteria. We do have criterias, of course, in terms of the types of institutions we want to partner with, because we have a mission and vision, right? And a core belief in terms of what the Bronx deserves, right? So we believe the Bronx deserves a digital oasis, not a digital desert, right? We believe the Bronx deserves to have food on everyone's table and not have to worry about every day where food's coming from, right? We believe that home ownership should be, paramount, right? We should own our community. We believe that broadband is a human right. We really truly believe that broadband should be low cost to free, right? The same way you turn on water is the same way you should be able to turn on your broadband and your internet. And so core to that is basically partnering with organizations who believe in our mission and vision, right? And focusing on that. So I wouldn't say we have a criteria, but we have a mission and vision, and we have a way in which we work, and we look for organizations that align to that. We have a racial equity lens. Everything we do is viewed through that racial equity lens, whether it's grant making, whether it's how we work with organizations. And so I wouldn't say that there's a limiting criteria, but there's a mission, vision, and view in terms of what our beliefs are, and those beliefs drive forward the organizations we partner with.
Great. Okay. Another one. So the unemployment rate in the Bronx right now is very high, and roughly 3 times the national level, and around twice as high as the rest of the city. So how do you think about jobs in the Bronx, jobs that were lost in the service sector? And also, how do you think about preparing people and people in the Bronx for particular jobs that require technology skills or other skills for the future?
Absolutely. Great question. So workforce development is a critical area to focus on for us when it comes to the revitalization of communities like the Bronx. And so what we've started to do is we've started to partner with education organizations like DreamYard, Here to Here, Knowledge House, Perscolas, and others who are focused on looking at digital literacy, right? Digital literacy is core to this. How do we provide 21st century tools, resources, and technology and skill sets, right? And so there's a number of different ways in which we're doing that. One is we're talking directly to the higher ed institutions in the Bronx, right? So we've spoken to quite a large number of them. And we are talking about, one is doing more work in the community, right? How do you, a lot of these institutions have been in the community for a long time, but in their own words, they believe they could be doing more, and we would agree with that, right? One part of the way that they could be doing more is partnering with CBOs to really provide a community-based experience for their students, but also how do we leverage that to make sure that there's a pipeline, right? There's a pipeline of jobs between those institutions and corporations and CBOs. And so we're looking at workplace experience, experiential learning as an example, right? So, I'll give my example, right? When I left higher education and I went to work for the bank, it took probably about 6 to 12 months of training, right, for them to get me up to speed on what my job is. Well, why can't you front load that and get that training done at earlier stages while students are in school, right? Why don't you get companies and institutions to partner closely with students to give them the skill sets before they get into the institution, right? That would save a significant amount of money and provide a value to students. And so providing that level of expertise to an level of experience to our students is a way for us to revitalize and come back from COVID-19. Other things that we've done, just to give you an example, is through our small business area, and our food and security area, we've partnered with restaurants to keep restaurants open and keep Bronxites employed. We partner with restaurants to keep them open to serve meals. And so whilst they're serving meals, they're obviously employing staff, but they're also solving a food insecurity need. So that's another example where we've focused on workforce development, but it's a multifaceted, multi-pronged solution. It's partnering with higher ed institutions. It's partnering with corporations. We're talking directly to companies about coming into the Bronx. It's partnering with CBOs to provide experiential learning opportunities in the community. And so it's a multifaceted solution. And so, yeah, it's definitely an area we believe is important to revitalizing in a post-COVID world.
Great. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So what is your advice to young people like us who want to get involved in more public service work? In your opinion, what are the best ways to do this? What advice do you have to people who are very committed to the city and to vulnerable New Yorkers?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to talk about the work that we're doing. We truly believe that the best way to go about doing it is literally just starting. A lot of people find their opportunities in different ways, but you have to just have the conviction to stand up and go and do it. And for us, it's about finding your passion, right? It's about finding something or a cause that you truly believe in, and finding an organization that truly is matched to that passion, and just putting all chips in and really just having conviction to get up and do it. And it's not going to be easy, right? It's not going to be, particularly in a COVID world where there are volunteer opportunities are becoming few and far in between. You are going to have to go the extra mile to put your hand up and really try to provide support, right? And so it's harder more now than ever to do the traditional giving back, because you generally will go to a volunteer event and you could do that, right? And so you are going to have to go the extra mile to put your hand up to support. And for us, it was literally just, we obviously had lived experiences, but we just needed to get up and do the work, right? And just go out and sort of, believe in our passion and take it by both hands, right? It's also, I think, important to find something that's close to home, right? Something that maybe a friend has struggled with, or something that maybe a family member has struggled with, or someone you noticed where there's a challenge that's personal, because you can always link your passion to that personal effect. And I find that's when it's most important or more impactful, when I have that personal interest in it. And so that would be my recommendation, is just find your passion, find something that hits home for you in the heart, and just literally, get up and go and do it.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you for joining us today. I think that basically wraps it up. And yeah, thank you so much. There'll be a recording too. I can send that around. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And if you want to know more about us, you can go to thebronx.org. And more than happy to answer any questions anyone has separately. Thank you.
Bye.